This is Autistic Parents UK, here live with Kieran Rose, the Autistic Advocate.
Hello.
Hello, hello all, hello world. So today we are talking about autistic parenthood, of course, and the particular issues, differences, things that could come up for newly diagnosed, newly identified, newly realised autistic parents. So if you've got any questions for Kieran, please do pop them below. I have got Aisha, she's not here on camera, but she's attached to me on WhatsApp, and she'll be sending the questions through. So we will be doing questions live as well. But we have had the questions up over the week, Kieran, so we have had a few questions through. So we'll start at the top. You will find, people who are watching, that Kieran and I tend to veer a little bit. Yeah. So just call us back with those questions if we veer too much.
We do need someone just to lure us back to the
and the point is, so if we start at the top, so if you are someone who is newly diagnosed, newly identified, newly realised, who do you think the best people to tell are?
That's a very good question. Obviously that's a very individual thing, because you will have different people in your life that whose maybe validation you might need more than others, or whose opinions might carry more weight than others. If we're talking family, partners, I would say would be quite important to that. Your children as well. There's no reason to keep it from your children, I would say, at all. But then when you start going into kind of wider family, that's when you might, lots of people have an experience where family members are a little bit dismissive, or don't believe you at all. Obviously that's not everybody. Some family members are absolutely supportive, but I think you'll probably know in your gut who will give you a good response and who won't, and who will validate you and who won't. So I would say it's kind of pick and choose your disclosure battles, and think carefully. And also, you don't have to do it all at once. You don't have to like tell the whole world straight away. You could do it slowly. You can let it out bit by bit. I think it's important that people know, but it's also important that they understand. So another aspect of that as well is that you have to understand enough in order to be able to explain well enough what autism is and what it means for you. So if you can't do that, and then someone's a bit dismissive or invalidates you, then you're likely to just but and not be able to go, or it will just fall into an argument. And so I think it's important that you, before you do anything with anybody, that you have a good grasp of what it is you're actually trying to convey to them as well. And I think that's probably a little bit different with partners and things, because you've probably, if you do have a partner, you've probably gone on that diagnostic journey with your partner. And so they might need some support in understanding it, but at least they'll know that it's your diagnosis, that you've got that, or if you've self-identified that, why you're doing those things. So but if it's employers and things like that, that's a very, very different kettle of fish. And I'd always would advise to be very cautious in your disclosures. You'll know your employer better than anybody, so you might have an idea of how they'll react, and if ever they've supported other people with similar things, and made reasonable adjustments and accommodations and things like that. But you do have a legal right to reasonable adjustments and accommodations. We know in the real world that doesn't always happen, and that disclosures aren't always taken very well. There's plenty of us that have had histories of constructive dismissal and tribunals and things like that, and have been kind of shoehorned out of our jobs after disclosure. So that's not me saying be terrified, because that's going to happen to you. But what that is me saying be very, very careful and cautious, and think about what you might need to change to support you before you go and disclose, so that you can go in, explain your situation, and also then explain what it is might help you. So I think a lot of employers appreciate the constructiveness of a disclosure, rather than you just walking in and saying, I need help, and then nobody knows what to do. And it's difficult as well, because with accommodations, not everybody understands themselves well enough to know what accommodations they need. So it needs to be a kind of flexible thing where, you might need to say to an employer, well, these are some basic things, but that might change. Or, as we hit roadblocks, I might discover new things that I'll need your support with. So it's all about having open, honest conversations, but do be careful around that as well.
Yes. Yeah, I've seen on various social media platforms people kind of putting the feelers out of kind of what did you ask your employer, what kind of things worked for you, and I think that that can work quite well. You know, that old autistic friend of having a script, of
Yeah.
going in and saying, okay, I'm going to say
Yeah.
X and Y and Z, and this is what I'm going to ask for, and this is what I'm hoping for, and this is what I'll compromise to. So that we don't end up exactly as you say with that you know, of where do you take it.
Yeah. And I think it's especially hard for, like with family, it's hard for employers who maybe where you've worked in a place for a while and haven't obviously needed anything, even though you probably have needed lots of things. And then they'll be like, well, hold on a minute, you've just got this diagnosis now. All of a sudden you're needing all this extra stuff. From their perspective, it can look like that. Whereas you may have been masking, you may have been hiding all the struggles that you've kind of had up until then. So, you know, it is about reading the room and kind of being aware how other people are going to react to things so that you're pre-prepared, so that you can kind of negate things and like Ruth said, kind of having that script a little bit, knowing what you want to say, writing it down so that also you can hand it over in paper as well. It can back up the things that you've said, you know, like you could say to them, I'll write up our conversation and email it to you so that, you know, because I can explain things a bit better when I'm writing them down, maybe, or you just whatever works best for you to kind of reinforce what you want them to know and what you want them to change.
Yeah, I think emails can work well, can't they? I don't. Would you say for some employers it might even work well to do your disclosure via email
I think
rather
so.
than face to face?
Yeah, I think it depends on who you work for and how you work. And again, some industries are going to be more accepting. If you're working in the IT industry, it's probably expected, you know, because that's where we all get shoehorned over to, and which obviously doesn't work for many of us, but works for a lot of there's a stereotype that we're good with computers, you know what I mean? So it's kind of, again, it depends who you work for, how you normally work anyway, the industry you're working, all those kind of things depends on how best to kind of do that disclosure and stuff. But I wouldn't just do it off the cuff. I would seriously sit and think about doing it really, really carefully. And maybe if you've got someone supportive in your life who, if you do write it down, can read it over with you and help you with that, you know, so it's not just you doing it. Because, you know, as we know, we use direct language sometimes and it isn't always received very well because those neurotypicals love everything fluffed up, love everything wrapped in a bow with a cushion around it. And, you know, so, and we're not always that good at doing stuff like that. So sometimes it can come across as being like bombastic or aggressive or whatever. And it's not at all. It's just the, you know, it's just that we're not fluffing our language up.
Yes.
So cushion it, I think, is a good bit of advice.
If you've got some good neurotypical friends out there who can translate it for you, basically put your text in neurotypical language. Yeah, that can work, can't it? Of softening the blow. That's what it is, isn't it? That's what neurotypical communication is all about, softening the blow.
And I do have to add the kind of disclaimer that all of this everything that we've just said is ridiculous, because you should just be able to walk into your employer and say, hi, I'm autistic. And your employer should then say to you, oh, that's amazing. What does that mean? And how can we help you?
Yes.
Reality is that doesn't usually happen. So unfortunately, we do have to prepare ourselves and arm ourselves.
Yeah. I think it's wise to. And actually, one of the specific questions was, how do you ask for accommodations from an employer who you've worked for a while? And so that's something that you've touched on there, is that exact situation can happen, that you can work for an employer for quite some considerable time. And we're masters, aren't we? So many of us are masters at hiding it. You know, we might go home every day and just go to bed, or have quite a few sick days off, but it's not sick days with anything unusual, but it's the physical strain on our bodies from the mental weight that we're carrying. When I look back at my employment history before I realized I was autistic, I was a fairly unreliable employee. It was when I was there I was fine, but I had reasonable amounts of time off sick, and that's it. When I look back I go, yeah, well, unsurprisingly, really, because I was enormously stressed all the time, but I wasn't in touch with myself enough to realize that I was enormously stressed all the time, and that was what made me sick.
It's interesting though. I mean, looking back at my work history, I've never had a proper and inverted commas full-time job. I've worked in schools where there were frequent school holidays. I worked flexi time. I worked like 5 days on, 5 days off. Things like that, patterns that actually, and none of that was intentional. It's just happened that way. But I needed it. And now looking back, I know that was my brain obviously unconsciously telling me, you're going to have to work like this because we're not going to be able to cope. We're not going to be able to work for a sustained period of time without a proper break. And it's just kind of happened that way. So, but in terms of asking for those adjustments, like I said, it's knowing what you need is really, really key. And that can be a really difficult thing because it could be around communication. It could be around the sensory environment. It could be anything. But this is why we, along with, we shouldn't need to be diagnosed anyway. I think we should be identified or welcomed. But that would be lovely. But with that diagnosis, it should come with an occupational, an OT assessment, because none of us know our sensory needs at all, and all of us have spent years blasting our bodies with awful sensory stuff without even realizing that it was hurting us. And I think a really good, thorough sensory assessment is absolutely useful for us in when you go in to ask for accommodations, because then what's going to hurt. If the lights are going to be bad, or if there's going to be electricity nearby that's going to be causing you disruption, or anything, whatever your sensory needs are, you can start framing it around that at least. So that's a really, because employers, again, when they think reasonable adjustments, they think physical stuff quite often. So if you can give them some of that physical stuff prior to this conversation, you go in with it. And if it's reasonable, obviously, you're not asking to have the roof stripped off or anything like that. But I think a lot of it would be around working from home if possible, flexi time if possible, stuff like that, stuff that's going to give you, that's the basic bare minimum kind of stuff that's going to give you those breaks.
That's it. It's the frequent breaks, isn't it? That there are some things that a lot of environments, they can't do a lot. If there's bright lights where you're working, you're working in a shop, you're working in an office, there isn't an awful lot that they can do around that, although you might be able to wear dark glasses or something like that. If there is the noise of people talking, it might well be overwhelming. Overlapping noise for me is one of mine that would just send me over the top really quickly.
One of the biggest accommodations that I've put in for myself, and obviously I'm self-employed now, so I don't have a boss to answer to. But Ruth, you'll have seen this in my email footer. Underneath where I sign off, I've got I use clear and direct communication because I'm autistic. I don't mask. Masking kills people, and I'm not going to spend 3 hours fluffing up this email just to send it to you so you don't get upset. So I'm paraphrasing, but that's the intention there. So you might want to talk to your boss about saying, can I put in a little email footer that just explains that when I send an email, if I don't say, hi, how's the weather? How's your children? Where did you go on holiday? If I don't say these things, it's not me being rude. I'm just clearly directly communicating with you the bits of information that I need you to have. So so little tiny things like that can make such a huge difference to people, because then it creates an expectation that that's how you communicate. Or
I suppose another accommodation you could ask on that kind of front is, can I draft an email and then somebody else fluffs it for me before we press send? If the client is going to be deeply offended because I haven't asked them exactly how the last thing I did with them is working out for them, then I just need a fluffer. Can I have an email fluffer? And actually that was something for me in previous jobs, was having somebody to help with the administrative side, that when I look back now, even though at the time I didn't realize I was autistic, my executive function means that administrative work for me is unbelievably boring. I always think it's completely pointless. So I just have no motivation to do it. So I did end up saying to employers, even as I say, pre-autistic realization, if you want me to do my job and do it well, somebody else needs to do the boring paperwork, because I'm just useless at it. And I did get to a point pretty much where they said, yeah, all right then. I was good enough at my job that they let other people do my boring, because I just hate it. Although I have to admit, they'll never find me now. But when I left, I hid a massive pile of paperwork went and hid it in the cellars where no one was ever going to find it. Don't do this, folks. This is a bad habit.
Yes, that's bad advice. Bad route.
Bad advice. That's not an accommodation you can ask. Can I hide my paperwork in your cellars? But I'm very bad at paperwork. But yes, I'm self-employed these days.
I bet they never missed it though.
I would be amazed if they missed it.
I bet it's still sitting there.
It's just reams and reams of stuff that's just kind of
nobody ever looks at.
Nobody looks at. Nobody cares. It was in case we ever got sued. But to be honest, if you ever get sued, they just go, yeah, all right, then here we go, because it was a bank, so they just give you. Let's see, questions come through. A question about a child, not sure if it's relevant. My son is non-verbal, he uses an AAC device. How do you explain to people that there is a possibility my son may never be verbal? I know they are hopeful, but I know realistically he may not. Oh, that's not completely on topic, but given that I've asked it out loud, we can have a look at that.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah. So obviously the fact that he's non-speaking or an unreliable speaker is fine if he has a valid way of communicating. I would recommend that all autistic people have access to second and third party forms of communication that are not their voices, whether that's AAC or anything else. But explain it to other people. I'm presuming this is family members with an expectation that he will speak at some point. And I think just be honest with them, and be honest with them that it's okay that if he doesn't, if he can communicate in an absolutely valid other way, what does it matter? Who cares? You know, it's not, we think as people that speech is our like main dominant form of communication, but it isn't. Speech is not the most dominant form of communication for human beings. We communicate in a huge variety of different ways, and you know, but if it's direct information that they need and it's a direct conversation that they need, whether he uses text to speech or picture cards or however he communicates, absolutely fine and valid. I wouldn't be worried about what other people think, because what other people think is hard, but it's irrelevant.
Yeah, and maybe also being aware that autistic people develop at very different rates to neurotypical people, and so this idea of never as well, to kind of wrap your head around that actually never might be completely incorrect, that some people start to communicate verbally at 8 or 12 or whenever a time that's beneficial to them. So to not panic.
I mean,
much.
I would always say, you know, remove the expectation and you're never going to be disappointed. So and question why that expectation is there as well. And have, you know, we've just been talking, haven't we, about all the jobs that you can hold without needing to communicate verbally, and in fact, going back to our previous conversation there, it can be a good accommodation to ask for those of you who are employed and thinking about what you could ask your employer is things around verbal communication, because it's exhausting. And so having those, exactly as Kieran said there, other alternative ways of communication, being able to have a time where you can say, actually, I'm just going to turn my phone off, text me or email me, can be really powerful, can't it? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's advocating for yourself in the most powerful way.
Yeah, exactly. I know an autistic friend of mine has recently been recommended by a speech and language therapist to use an AAC device, although they are able to communicate verbally, because of that, because sometimes it's just exhausting and overwhelming, and particularly when they're outside of the house, and so there's quite a lot of other things going on, that using an AAC may well help prevent meltdowns and shutdowns. And their first response was, but I'm faking because I can talk if I want to, and trying to get out of their own head.
That's internalized ableism. That's a really good example of that. But I'm the same. When I'm not talking about autism, which is really when anybody watching this who's seen me talking before will only really see me talking about autism. When I'm not talking about autism, I rarely talk. Now that's a shock to some people, because I'm very clearly hyperlexic. I'm very clearly verbose, but I'm verbose because I'm talking about my specialist subject. If we were going on mastermind terms, you know, so then my hyperlexia pushes through, and makes me very, very verbose about that subject. But in my family home, we all communicate through text devices, through email, through WhatsApp, and do the same with most of my friends. Very rarely speak like this to my friends. It's usually over some form of text and stuff, and even when they're with me quite often. So I talk when I have to, but talking is really part of my mask in terms of it exhausts me. It's not my preferred method of communication, and it really exhausts me. And also I've noticed as I've gotten older, I'm finding that I need more downtime after after a talk like this, than I would used to have done. So it's actually exhausting me more and more as I get older. And I would imagine there'll come a point where I rarely speak at all.
Yes.
And that doesn't scare me because I have access to so many other different forms of communication that I don't need words.
No, we're really fortunate, aren't we, to live in the time that we are, where
Yeah.
it's not even bizarre, it's not even specifically autistic
Yeah.
to do most of your communication through text messages, through WhatsApp, through whatever platform you use, doesn't even make you stand out, kind of thing. And that I think that there's a growing understanding of that, that I see it even on TV, even in media, of a teenager being upstairs and texting their mum downstairs, kind of thing. And why not? I'm always saying to my kids, don't shout to me, just come to me. So I don't have a whole house full of
Isn't it? I find it really, really ironic that as a kind of anecdotally autistic people created the internet, seeking information, seeking the sharing of information, and then anecdotally autistic people created all this technology that uses the internet. And then anecdotally they created social media as well because they were seeking connection. So so we've enabled ourselves with all of this stuff that the neurotypical world is starting to frown upon. You can't be on your screens all the time. Well, actually, when we're on our screens, we're communicating all the time. We're talking to other people. When we're playing our games, we're communicating with other people. We share, we frame everything around the things that we're interested in. So, and we connect over those things as well. And it's a very, very valid way of connecting with people, communicating, and finding our kin as well.
Yeah, and with one of the things, I think I saw Chrissy Forbes talking about this recently, that one of the benefits of communicating through screens and communicating through text, rather than verbal communication, is that it's so much easier for our processing speeds to be able to just take a moment and go, okay, what does that mean? What do I want to reply? I can just delete that, and then reword it in a better way and send it, and that's so much easier, isn't it? That I still find, even knowing myself, I still find after I've done lots of verbal communication, I'll be going back through my mind, why did I say that? I didn't, and
you can edit text.
You can edit. That's it. It's being able to edit your life.
No, I mean, that's it. I think when Christy wrote that had come out of a conversation that she and I had actually in one of her courses, because I support her with one of her courses, and we were talking about the fact as well that when you are communicating over a device or whatever, when you're not geographically in the same room as someone, it removes all of the pressure. It removes all the social pressures, because we're all humans are self-monitoring all the time. So it stops us having to sit there thinking, am I saying the right thing? Am I making the correct amount of eye contact? Am I sitting in the right position? All of those things that autistic people are actively thinking about all get stripped back when you're communicating over a device. So you can put your energy into the conversation and not thinking about everything around that conversation and then actually missing the conversation.
Yes, that's it. Missing, especially when there's more than one person trying to manage that. I find it, this, funnily enough, actually, that is my job, is talking to huge amounts of people. But I don't mind it because I'm the leader. It's when I'm not the leader that I find it really hard. If I'm not controlling the pace of the conversation, it will whiz, and that's it. So doing it written down is much easier, isn't it?
Certainly is.
Aisha's just commented, actually, saying this is the main reason she's supporting us in text.
Well, exactly.
Today, and that she's got kids in the background. This is the other thing, is that as a parent, it's so I always say to my clients, look, you can call me if you want to, but I home educate 4 children, all of whom are loud, and all of whom only want to talk to me when I'm on the phone. So I will answer the phone with things like, stop standing on your brother's penis, which tends to put people off. But it might be easier to send me a text message, or I don't need to do that. Welcome to a little insight onto my family life. But you know, I call it mummy Tourette's, right? It's just when you're on the, and I don't mean that as an ableist, please. I really hope that doesn't offend anybody. But it's the being on the phone, talking to somebody, and then stop it. And what did I do? No, I'm not talking to you.
Yeah,
talking to the cats. And
that's a massive kind of part of the masking narrative as well, is when quite often when we're masking, it gets disrupted when different aspects of our lives come together. So you might be with your friends and you see your boss, and then you're like, how do I act? I don't know how to act in this situation. This is really awkward. Or, you know, like for those of you that have been in relationships, you know, like when you bring your partner home for the first time, and then you are one way with your partner when you're with your partner, and you're one way with your family when you're with your family, and then all of a sudden those two worlds collide. That's a really difficult, complicated thing to navigate, because it's just two worlds literally smashing together, and you don't know where to put yourself, and you don't know how to speak, and you try and make a joke, and then you realize that joke's fallen flat because it's not a joke that you would normally say with those people, and all of those kind of things, and then you're just exhausted afterwards and you never do it again. But yeah, it's all wrapped up in the same kind of things.
Yes, yeah, it's hard, isn't it? And we've got another one from another question from Lisa, going back to work. I think my job works well for me at the moment, but I have no formal accommodations. Would it be an idea to put needs, e.g. pacing myself, written communications in documents so these can continue should my line manager change in the future?
Yes, absolutely, 100% yes. This is like the amount of schools that say, oh, we don't need an IEP, or we don't need an EHCP, you know, and then all of a sudden teacher changes or something, and then everything just goes to pot because that teacher's come in and doesn't do what the other one did. You need to have it written down, and that doesn't have to make it like a horrible formal thing, or you're not, you know, but I would go to your employer or your line manager and say, actually, I've been thinking about this, and should anything happen, I think it's reasonable that I think it's important that we write this down and have a record of it, because you might not stay forever, or I might go somewhere else and I might forget stuff that I've needed. You know, if you balance it out with things like that, then, you know, it's reasonable to have it written and recorded.
Yeah, it seems like a very good idea. I mean, actually, because even if your line manager has been there for 20 years and plans to be there for another 20 years, people get sick, life changes, promotions come out of nowhere, all the rest of it. It's a very good idea to have it formally recorded, exactly as you say. I've come across many people with EHCPs particularly, or not an EHCP, or a vaguely worded EHCP, but they're doing fine, and then that's it, class changes.
And the thing is with employment as well, is that if something does change or something goes happen and it goes horribly wrong, you've not got everything written down, you've got no legal backing as well. If you did need to go to a tribunal, or you did need to kind of hold them up to account in some way, if you've got it recorded, it's legally recorded, then they can't argue about it. But if there's nothing there, they can turn around and say, well, you haven't disclosed to us, you've never told us anything. You know, those things, not saying that they will happen, but they are potential things to be of concern, and they're concern enough that it's important to write those things down to protect yourself.
And we mentioned that, didn't we, that if it's if you're in a situation where you're disclosing to your employer, even if you're doing it verbally, it's probably a good idea to say, I'll summarize this and send you an email, and you can tell me whether you agree,
or ask them to, so it comes from them.
That's it, so that you've got it in writing. Felix is asking, what kind of communities for autistic parents are you aware of, obviously other than this community right here, outside of the UK as well? What kind of ones do you access or recommend?
Outside of the UK, I don't know, I might think about that one.
Well, Christy's got, hasn't she? She's got the Intune Pathways in Australia.
Christy has Christy Forbes has she runs her course, and she has a, you know, there's a real community aspect to that, because everyone, the way that she runs her main course is that there's kind of a video every 2 weeks that everyone gets to watch in their own time, and then she brings everyone together to, you know, to have like a 2 hour long Q&A. But anyone that's previously been on the course can also access that. So sometimes we have 10 people and sometimes we have 150 people, you know, so it just depends on who's coming. So there's a really lovely community around that. And she also runs the NDCO, which is Neurodiversity Collective, which I'm a part of, and a lot of other great people are part of. And we're literally there answering questions and things. She also has a ITAF, I think it is, which is you have to pay for membership, and it's like I don't know, like 20 Australian dollars a month or something. But then there's a huge forum in there where everybody, it's like Facebook, but off of Facebook, where everyone can kind of come together, and they have regular kind of video calls of each other and stuff. And so yes, there's that. But I don't know. I mean, outside of your support groups, there's a couple of other Facebook groups, but they're more just kind of generally international. But I don't think there is much support for autistic parents.
No, I have to say
not
to you
specifically.
that, Aisha and I looked, and that was why we started Autistic Parents UK, because when you Google autistic parents, what comes up is lots and lots of support groups for parents of children who are autistic.
Yeah.
And in fact, we still get lots of inquiries from people. That's why we have the questions on the actual group.
Yeah.
is because lots of the people that come through are looking for a support group because their child has just been diagnosed as autistic.
Mm-hmm.
And they're looking for that kind of support group, and there's lots of support groups for that. But that was what Aisha and I were looking for. We're saying, well, where's the support group for us? You know, we don't want to bitch about our kids, we don't even want to bitch about our lives. We just want people who understand what we're talking about when we say, when my child is asking for something desperately and I'm hungry and the radio's on and then my phone rings, I might actually cry and have somebody say, yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I put my phone on silent at lunchtime, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That was actually what we were setting it up for. But yeah, so have a look at Christy in Australia. And if anybody in the comments is aware of groups that we're not aware of, please do feel free to put those on there, because we're by no means an exhaustive list of
certainly not. I mean, I think part of the reason they don't exist in great numbers is that out of probably various different presentations of autistic people who are parents are incredibly stressed and lacking in time, because we're usually fighting local authorities and school systems and you know, benefits and all of those kind of things, and doesn't leave you with many spoons left to do anything else.
No.
But then to be running a Facebook group peer supporting other people is really, really a big thing to ask. So you know, and it's a big ask of anyone that runs any autistic person that is involved in running a Facebook support group anyway, because you know, there's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pressure.
That's it. And on that note, if anybody would like to join our volunteering team, just contact us. But I mean, it has its lovely side as well. It does have real rewards. We do really, really enjoy it. But that's it. We have to do it around the edges of kids and work and life and all of that kind of stuff. And it's the same for everybody. We mentioned it, didn't we, in our first Q&A, of kind of why there's not this great big unified autistic power out there, and it's pretty much because we're all living our lives, and our lives take up like
we're all a bit tired.
95% of our energy, and there isn't much left. Question from Dennis. I had to stop my previous professional career due to burnout after my son was born. Then I had formal diagnosis as autistic. I now work part-time but can't earn enough. Any suggestions about autistic-friendly work, which is halfway between previously a doctor in rehabilitation medicine, now a bank hospital porter? Okay, that's quite specific.
That's a huge swing, isn't it? It's a hard one because obviously we don't know you, and it's obviously, you know, it's individual as to what everybody's skills and strengths are. But I mean, if you are a doctor, then I would imagine maybe something along the lines of maybe consultancy or something like that might work better for you. Being a private consultant is what I mean, rather than working for somebody else for a lot of us who are able to work, self-employment usually is the best and most effective way of supporting ourselves. It comes with its own barriers. It's not an easy thing to do, and you are very much reliant on yourself for income. But it's probably, it's lots of things have saved my life, but being self-employed is one of them. I could no longer work for anybody else and be trapped within anybody else's kind of framework and things. I keep my own hours. I work as long or as well, I work as little as I possibly can, because I have no choice in that, because I've got 3 children. But I am reliant on only myself to make money, and that sometimes can be a scary thing. But I'm not out to make millions. I'm out enough to kind of feed my kids, make sure the roof stays over my head. I'm not money focused, so which means that I can do stuff like this. Obviously I'm not being paid to do anything like this. I don't want to be paid to do anything like this, because stuff like this I do because it's important, and I love doing it as well. So it enables me to have that kind of, this is work-life balance for me, because this isn't work.
Yeah,
this is life as well, because I'm having a nice chat with Ruth. I know Ruth. So it's good fun to be able to do this, and it's important because it's helping people. So I would think maybe if you can, looking at using your skills base and using your strengths in a way that works for you, rather than thinking about a job, creating something for yourself if possible. That's a very privileged thing to be able to do, but it works for a lot of us.
yes, yeah, absolutely. Kind of carving out, isn't it? Carving out,
making a niche. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Rachel, nice to see you.
Well, thank you. Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes.
Oh, good. It's all working. Yay. I'm sorry I'm late, sorting out the children. Tears because of a broken toy,
Yes.
No,
that's fine.
It's Friday.
We were just talking about the fact that autistic parents means that we're doing everything around the edges of everything else. It is very much a bit of that, isn't it? Of constant juggling, constant prioritizing,
yes,
writing stuff down. And then I'll forget it.
Yeah, that was this morning. Did you see it this morning? I was typing that. That was at 6:30 this morning. That thought came in as soon as I woke up, and I was like, I need to type this down before it goes poof.
We had a good one in the pre-questions as well. How do you judge how much mask to maintain, given that society is dominated by predominant neurotypes, by neurotypicals?
That's a hard one to answer, because again, it's a very individual question. But I wouldn't look at it at that at all, because there is no constant level of mask that you have to sustain, because it will fluctuate as your situations fluctuate and as your energy levels fluctuate. So I would look at it less than kind of what you can do for them, rather than I would look at what you can do for yourself. So taking the mask off for me isn't about not doing it anymore. It's about being in control of it, and knowing that you restrict yourself as much as you possibly can to go into any places that feel safe for you, only restricting yourself as much as you possibly can about spending time with people who feel safe to you, so you don't have to put the effort into masking, and then you're reserving it for when you do need to put that effort in. And again, that's a very privileged thing, because understanding what that looks like for you takes a lot of time, because so much of our masks are unconscious. But the more accommodations we put in for ourselves, and the more we understand ourselves and are able to advocate for ourselves, the more control and awareness of ourselves we're going to have, and the more control over our situations we're going to have as well.
Yes, that's a lovely one. And thinking about thinking about your downtime, isn't it, around a mask? So I know that for my real work, I have like another little persona who I take on for my work, who is mask. And now that I can be honest, and I've had more time to get to know myself and be honest with what's going on, I try and give myself, if I'm working, right, the next day I've got zero plans. I'm not going to socialize. We're not going to go out. We're all just going to sit around and do the bare minimum, because I need to give my brain a break. And if I think, I'll go and see my mum the next day, or I can do it, and
Have
then
you
I'll
swallowed
get
the lid?
brain,
No.
and I'll
Oh,
go
has it gone in there?
No.
Well, that's fine. I started to
You know,
pour it in.
It's right there.
No, please don't cut
No, it's
yourself.
right
So
at
it's that,
the top.
isn't it? Sometimes
Right at the top.
thinking around the edges of
Yeah.
when you need to mask,
Yeah.
what can you do then to
mitigate that as much as
right,
possible.
and that's it.
Yeah.
Mitigate.
And a lot of it is planning ahead, and
Yeah.
you can't plan for everything. Obviously, you can't. Stuff happens all the time that we've got no control over, but there will be things that we know that we have to do. So balancing that out as much as possible and planning and preparing for that as much as possible is a way of taking control. And all of this and all of that will help reduce your anxiety as well, because anxiety at the end of the day is about not having control over something. So the more we understand something, the more control we will feel that we have over it.
Yeah, exactly. And I thought, actually, even, do you know what, I'm thinking about it. I don't manage at the moment, but I try and do a little bit every day, because we've talked about this before, haven't we? The fact that you need to mask a little bit with your own kids.
Sometimes,
that there is a degree, I don't do the same as I do with work, but a degree of I'll be calm when actually inside I don't feel very calm. And so I try every evening, even if it means that I stay up quite late, to have at least an hour of no kids, to just
processing time.
That's it kind of filing away, download time, isn't it? Rachel, I put you on mute, my darling, just because of the kids in the background, but you're welcome to unmute yourself whenever you fancy. I don't want you thinking that I was do you need me to have a say, see if it comes up? Sorry, I wasn't trying to break you.
There you go.
No, it's okay. Anytime I pick up the phone or do anything, nobody wanted me before, but it's all of a sudden like I've switched on a magnetic source where everyone just goes to me. Oh my gosh.
We were just talking about it before you came on, that I have that exact thing, that as soon as I pick up the phone, all of my kids will desperately need my attention.
When I tell them that my name is no longer Mummy, you have to guess it, and then I'll respond.
Mummy's checked out.
This is like the Hotel California.
We had another couple of good ones in the pre-questions that we'll try and get through.
Sure.
So one of them was what can you do if you confidently go all the way through the official diagnostic process and then you're met with a no at the end, possibly even more than once?
That's a hard one. There's an argument to say there that maybe you're not autistic, but that depends what you feel in your gut. If you relate to it hard enough, then the chances are that you're probably right, and you're being met with diagnosticians that aren't maybe very good, or aren't asking the right questions or seeing the right things. You can always go back for a second referral, third referral, fourth referral. Some people, there are plenty of people on the internet that would say, well, that's you chasing a diagnosis and you're not listening to the experts and they're telling you you're not this thing and blah, blah, blah. But we know, the experts. I've got poorly arms from doing this too much. I don't bother anymore. I just need permanent ones just next to me.
Like
actually, Rachel, we need the one on the other side here. But yeah, we know, we are perfectly aware as a community, and plenty of the experts are aware as well, that the diagnostic criteria is incredibly flawed and narrow, that the process of diagnosis can be very, very weak and looks in the wrong places for the wrong things at the wrong times. It's looking for incredibly stressed autistic people, incredibly stressed autistic people, and and the diagnostic process is set up only to recognize autistic people who are in crisis. So you're very fortunate if you're not in crisis and you do get a diagnosis. That means that you've somehow managed to wiggle your way through. But I would say that if it's through the NHS and you keep getting knocked back, I would, if you can, again, another privileged thing, save up and see if you can get a private diagnosis, if it's that important to you to get one.
Yes. Yeah, I think that would be my question back to the original person who posed this, was what would be the specific benefit of having a healthcare professional agree with you if you are very confident in your own neurotype, and that there are benefits. We've touched upon some of them today.
I think something, Anita. Sorry.
Yeah, go on, Rachel.
Just because I don't know when to butt in. Not butt in, but you know.
Yeah.
Just butt in, it's fine.
What a butt in. Oi! Sorry. Right. Yeah, what was I going to say? This is what happens. I get really stressed about knowing when to say something. And then when I get in, such a relief. I'm sure the relief takes away my thought. Bye. See ya.
So we were talking about whether
diagnosis.
Diagnosis,
Sorry. So the thing I would ask is, I'd want to know, can you give me a full report on why you don't think that I'm autistic?
Really
and do you know that we don't actually know what autism looks like without trauma?
Yeah.
And that the research that was done to create the diagnostic criteria is hugely flawed, biased, and based on autistic people in environments that don't meet need, and so they are traumatized. And autism is not somebody who's in distress. Autism is autism, you know, and that's what people are looking for when they're assessing you, is for, like you said, Kieran, an autistic person in distress. Well, at what point does anybody say, yeah, this is a healthy way to go forward? Because I just go, no. You know, if like sending my son and myself going for assessment, loads of people were telling me, you have to make sure that you spend all your spoons before you go, because if you go in being able to cope, that you'll fail. It's like, oh my God. And then the word fail, you know, like if you don't meet the criteria or whatever, then you fail. Then it's like, how much rejection is any human being supposed to tolerate, you know? I don't know, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. And then especially when you, I suppose, you know, going back to the original question, that when you add in the potential for rejection sensitive dysphoria, which is, I know something I experience, it can be really painful, can't it, and very hard to get over. And my first reaction always to rejection is, bye, off I go, then I'm going to shut that door. I'm never going to experience that pain again, so I'm going to do whatever I can to just end it. But
I said that to my I said that to my husband yesterday. I am not going to play school to pick up our son again. That's it. I give up. I'm handing in my notice. I don't want this job anymore. I am so fed up of because of the spiky profile. Oh, well, you can do this, but you can't do that. There's some, you know, you're obviously faking it or something. You know, it's like, oh my God. And like tonight I went to pick up my prescription, which the tablets that I have to take, otherwise I will not live. So it's a really important medication. It's like, I phoned up last week, couldn't get through, phoned up again, still couldn't get through. It kept telling me to go through the NHS app. So I did that, can't find it on there. So when I finally get through to the doctor and say, I need a repeat prescription, I'm running out. Tonight I've got nothing left, you know, tonight, that's it. I'm sort of freewheeling it. Anyway, cut a long story short, they said that they'd try and do an emergency thing. They said that the website was not working because I'm due a review, but why doesn't it say that on there? Because I'm just like, well, where is it gone? There's nothing, no information. And I'm just like assuming that it's just disappeared. And then when I go to the chemist, I'll phone them up and say, have you got it yet? And the chap says, no, we've not got it yet. Oh, I'll just reboot the system. No, we've not got it yet. Put the phone down. And then I tried to phone the doctors. And while I'm trying to phone the doctors, the chemist is then calling me back saying, oh, we've got your prescription, but you've got 5 minutes to get here. I've got 2 boys, a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old, one who's autistic like me, no preparation, you know, to get in the car and go there. And then when I get there, he dumps a load of stuff at my door, like to almost make me feel bad, which I'm like, why? At what point did you decide that that would be helpful to anybody when you know what I've been through already? And then you just tell me you need to plan sooner. I felt like telling him to foxtrot Oscar. I was this close to going blue, you know? You know, when you just sort of think to yourself, oh my gosh, I need to wear a t-shirt or something that says, you know, expectations are created by the person who created them, and I won't own them.
I am when I had number 3.
Can you see that I hated that?
Yeah. When I
clear?
when I had number 3, no, number 2 had a particularly hard time, and this was before we realised that we were all autistic, and it was quite stressful for a good year. It was really quite stressful, and a lot of the time we went out, we'd have lots of meltdowns, and it was all quite hard. And I had so many people tut at me in supermarkets and even make comments on. I actually got my friend to make a tote bag that said, "Help me all fuck off."
Yay!
It did work quite well at stopping old people from tutting at me, but they just tut at me before the meltdowns because
of the swearing.
So it was like preemptive rejection sensitivity.
I did actually have one.
I know you're going to reject me, so I'm going to be really abrasive.
I'm going to preempt it.
I'm going to preempt your rejection. I'm going to reject you. Go away. We've digressed a bit.
Sorry.
Going on to what we were discussing.
I really like your earrings, by the way, Ruth. I need to tell you.
Thank you.
They're very that one dangly one is very distracting. I want to know what it looks. Is it a star?
No, look, it's a flower. It matches my very flowery dungarees.
Oh wow, it's lovely.
Gabby says women in Scotland continuously report being knocked back and told they are not autistic for the most ridiculous reasons, i.e. having a partner, having a job, etc. we know it. We know it. It definitely happens, doesn't it? And it's another one of those. I saw that it was an excerpt from the study. I didn't read the full study, I have to say, saying that the current thinking is that autism is about 83% genetic. And again, you want it on a t-shirt, don't you? You know, look, if autism is 83% genetic, it means that we're making babies. Like,
yeah,
yes,
I am
where
a
do
creator
they
of autistic
think we all
people.
come from?
And I mean, that's it.
Space.
That's it.
we just manifest ourselves, just materialize.
Yeah, it's video games and vaccines, isn't it? I'm fairly sure it's a mixture of the two.
We're like ninjas.
What the person had said in the comments about kind of the reasons for being rebuffed and stuff. That's why when I wrote my paper on masking with Amy Pearson, we were very keen to look at the kind of the female autism phenotype, as it's being called, and deconstructing that and saying how ridiculous it is, because it's not that, I mean, I think there's a quote of myself in there that says that it's not that autistic women and girls have a different autism, it's that they suffer from different prejudice.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what's happening there. And it's kind of, and obviously this isn't just, it's predominantly autistic women and girls, but there's autistic non-binary people and trans people, and anyone that's really an internalizer that's hitting these same things. But there is another layer of sexism there as well, which is additional to all of those barriers that are in place for internalizers anyway, which is solely because of patriarchal attitudes and the fact that, you know, Asperger and Kanner and Bettelheim and all of the people that have come through history were all looking at a particular type of white boy. Not all white boys, a particular type of white boy that was probably distressed in the first place, and that's why they identified the criteria as it is, and we're still working off of a 1940s criteria.
Yes, that's it. And as you say, 1940s, and not only a particular type of white boy in distress, but also through a neurotypical lens of what they are deeming is causing that behaviour, of what they think it's about, rather than actually asking autistic adults and people who can communicate what is the cause, where this is coming from. And that's what we've got in common, isn't it? Is that how we, just like anybody, how we act, how we are perceived to the outside varies greatly, but what goes on internally, that's where our similarities lie.
Exactly. And it all depends on who you are and what lens people are looking at you through. And I would say to all the autistic women and girls out there, you haven't been missed because you have a different type of female autism. You've been missed because of sexism. That's why you've been missed, on top of all the narrative around autism anyway, which causes lots of us to be missed. You've got an extra layer of sexism there to deal with, and that's why.
And then also there's the people, as in the professionals, who are not like specifically trained in autism. Maybe they get like 6 weeks of a course. That's not enough, is it? You know, if you like went to the doctors and said, oh yeah, I've got a heart problem. Oh well, we've got a doctor here who did a 6-week course. It's all right for him to operate on you. No. So why is it okay to, like, you know, assess autistic people by someone who's just in the field of anything linked to the brain? Then in my view, it's like, what?
completely, Rachel. And there's an analogy there as well, because if you think of children, why then do they go to teachers who have no training whatsoever, no observational training to look for the things that they need to look for, and make a decision about diagnosis or not diagnosis based on a teacher's report? That's like if you had a doctor going to your employer and asking about you. You know, you wouldn't do that. So why do we do that with children as well?
Absolutely.
It's ridiculous.
It's very bizarre, isn't it? It's very bizarre. And what you then find is that the children who are quieter, who internalize, are very unlikely that the education system has noticed, because they're no problem. And so whatever is going on internally for them, if it does,
the ripple effect, that's called.
Yeah, it is.
They don't notice. And for the children that do erupt, you've often got the issue that the school won't believe that it's because of their neurotype. The school believe it's because of bad parenting, or just because they're a bad kid. We know that if the child is black or brown, it's much more likely to be blamed on them, that they're rape issues, children, behavioural, that's it. We know that if they're from a poorer background, from their working class, again, bad parenting, bad social upbringing, all the rest of it, rather than just somebody who understands neurotypes being able to look and say, oh yeah, I can see why you're having a really hard time, or even if it looks like you're not struggling, I can see that you are struggling, or your mum is saying that you have a meltdown every day on the way home. Why would we disbelieve her? You know, it's probably that you're having a meltdown on the way
home. That's a really important part of something I've been talking a lot about lately, because as you know, I talk about masking all the time. And I've had to start talking to people about the fact that not everything is masking. You know, parents talk about their children being great maskers. They go to school, they don't get seen. But a lot of that isn't because that autistic child is masking. A lot of it is because the people around that child don't know what they're looking for. And that's not masking. That's an uneducated professional network around that child. But it's victim blaming. There's a whole victim blaming narrative around it.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of, as well, like people's ego. I've met professionals who are completely accepting of me knowing more than them about autism, and then others who just hate me,
can't handle it,
almost like I threaten their job or something. It's like, I'm not come here for your job or your life. I've just come here to info dump you, because you know, this is where I can info dump. And then when you tell them stuff, they're like, it's almost like they feel they don't believe what you're saying is true. And it's just like, oh my gosh, if you asked, I mean, I don't like to use these as comparisons, but it's the only kind of thing I can think of is, so someone who was visually impaired or blind, to ask someone who is sighted what it's like to be blind, you just wouldn't do it, would you? Unless you've lived that life, you can't ever empathize or ever describe it. I mean, even if you do have that person who describes it, all people are individuals. You know, if identical twins are never exactly identical, then no human being on the whole planet can be identical. So I just find that really hard to understand. Like, surely if somebody, like, say for example, I'm in Derbyshire, and I've been told, I've been right around the system knocking on every door for help because I've been struggling. And every door I knock on, I even called 999 one day because I was just at my wit's end, and I was just like, somebody's going to die, you know. And to me, that's an emergency. So it was kind of like, yes, I can do this. And even that, I got put through to social services, blah, 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 you know. And all I got was a phone call to say this, that, and the other. And I explained to them, I'm like, well, look, you know more than us, so we can't help you. So apparently I know more than all of the professionals in the whole of Derbyshire. And believe me, I've contacted every service available. And this is the response I get. And I just think to myself, well, this is terrifying that I'm on my own. and it's only the autistic community and you guys and things like this where I can actually feel like I'm understood and heard, and that reduces the sort of terror that I feel, because I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's fine for me as a professional to help other people that I'm not emotionally invested in. But when I'm emotionally invested and they're my children and I'm in meltdown and I then can't help them, and then the people who are supposed to be supporting us won't support us because apparently I know more, and then because like the schools and stuff see me coping and I've got a master's in this and a degree in that, therefore I should be able to do this, and they almost look at me as if to say, well, why can't you do that? It's like, well, I have a spiky profile. I can interpret simultaneously between 2 languages, but I can't fold laundry,
Yeah.
And that people find that really hard to sort of grasp. It's like, what do you think? I'm a robot? I'm not on the same level with everything, and I don't think anybody is.
No human is.
Harry, please put them down.
No, I have seen an increasing amount of autistic people who are professionals who are reaching out to the autistic community, but it's still a tiny number. I saw a post recently of somebody saying, oh, this autistic woman, she's a psychiatrist and she's opened up her own practice, and everybody she employs is neurodivergent, and they'll assess people for their various neurodivergences, and I thought, wow, that's amazing. Yeah, she's in somewhere in America beginning with M. It was either Michigan or Massachusetts, one of the two. Not local, but but it's nice to know that kind of thing is out there anywhere.
It is happening. It is starting to happen, and that's I'm involved with the Therapist Neurodiversity Collective, and we've got I think we've just gone over 2,000 professionals in our support group now. So a lot of them are autistic, and a lot of them aren't, which is they're all at different levels of kind of understanding and stuff. But I mean, that's the thing. It's quite. I was talking to somebody today over Twitter, and we were talking about the fact that they were newly diagnosed and they'd thrown themselves into trying to figure everything out and understanding everything. But you need not only to understand yourself, you need to understand the wider narratives that are around us as well. If you're going to advocate effectively in any way, and if you're not aware of all those narratives, then you're going to go down a lot of blind alleys that other people have been down before. You might advocate in a way which is harmful and not even realize it. You might align yourself with an organization that is doing harm, and you might not recognize that. So there's so much responsibility around this, and it's sometimes I find it hard when you do get autistic professionals who have just realized that they're autistic and they come out and they want to make change in their industry. You can't do that overnight, and you can't do it without being properly prepared either.
Absolutely.
Sorry, Ruth.
Oh, it's okay.
I've become your echo.
Oh, absolutely, though.
Somebody,
Dolby's around.
Hill is saying ND adults want to educate teachers, but their own RSD is a huge barrier to speaking up to them. Their ND and trying to speak up, it is so hard, but doing it. And I think that can go back to what Kieran and I were discussing at the beginning of scripting, writing stuff down and getting your thoughts really clear and in order. But it can still be really challenging, if you have a scripted conversation and it starts off well and then goes off track, it can be really hard to pull it back, can't it? But that's not what I wanted to do.
No, and it is, and what Rachel said just before about kind of, I can go and talk at CEOs of companies, like literally have a go at CEOs of companies and things, and advocate generally and advocate for other people. But when it comes to my own family, that's really hard because you do have that emotional investment. And, then it doesn't also help that you're seen through a lens, especially by teachers, you're just a parent. And, they don't take into account your knowledge of your own children. They don't take into account your professional background, nothing. All of that goes out the window. You are just a parent. You're not even Kieran anymore. You're dad, which just minimizes you to the smallest thing. And then when you are then emotionally involved and you're trying not to get angry because it's your own kids or your own partner or whoever you're advocating for, and it's really hard not to kind of just go and across the table and throttle them because they're not listening or giving you the proper respect that you deserve. you know, they then look at you further through that. Well, you're just being emotional, especially if you're a woman as well. You know, you're being hysterical, and
you're a neurotic mum.
you're neurotic. And you know, all of that plays into it. So I mean, I would always recommend that when you're trying to advocate for your own children, try and bring someone else in, even if you are an advocate.
Yes.
Because that's so difficult to do.
Yeah, I bring in my social worker because she's seen as an outside professional who's not emotionally involved. She came to the last meeting with school because my son is refusing school for the good reasons, and I'm in trouble with the LEA and because he's been off, and I'm sort of saying, well, he's been off because he's terrified, and he's explained what's happened, and a friend of his has confirmed that it's true. And for me to send him back, in my opinion, is willful neglect. And so but at that meeting, it was really useful having the social worker because she knows about autism. Her partner's autistic and she's neurodiverse herself. She's dyslexic. But also the thing about what you were saying, Kieran, that's why I did my PG cert in autism, because I knew from the start where we had problems with the health visitor and the teachers not believing it was autism because he's too intelligent. And then all the things that I've read up over the past 3 years, it really sort of made me realise that I need to arm myself with this qualification, because they can't ignore that, can they?
No.
I don't know if that
makes sense.
Listen to me now. Now that I've finished it and I've got it, and because I've told them that I got a distinction, I think it sort of makes them feel a bit like, well, we can't argue this because none of us have got a qualification at that level.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that continues to be useful.
It can be hard. Actually, one of the questions that we had in the pre, when we had it up over the week, was receiving that official diagnosis and it not giving you what you wanted, and as you say there, Rachel, you've then had to go on and get a PG cert to actually be respected by professionals. And it's that, isn't it, that sometimes we think that official diagnosis is going to be a bit of a magic wand and give us all the answers to our lives. And
well, that course itself has given me so much, like a wealth of information that's just basically I've created script after script after script that I've prepared, and I've had to preempt what people are going to say so that I can immediately respond without satellite delay, because otherwise I just look like I'm going like this. I was like, right, I need to preempt what they're going to say, what they're going to do, this, that and the other. But then again, that's hard work, isn't it? Having to try and prepare yourself, prepare what you think they might ask you or what they might say, and then what's my defense, what am I coming back with? But yeah, absolutely, that course was a complete game changer, even though my husband thinks it was just for fun.
Aisha is saying that's one of the reasons that she's doing the course as well. Gabby has said, Rachel, I find this at uni. I'm studying as a mature student. They don't believe, my computer has chopped off that word. They don't believe I struggle because I have very good marks. Yet this hasn't resulted in a successful career or employment history. But
what do they want? Do they want to like draw blood and then look under it and I'm like, oh yes, you do have troubles. I can see it clearly now.
That's the thing. I was thinking about this before. I mean, if you I don't know, and I'm not comparing autism to something else here, but if you had a heart condition, they could look at your heart and measure your heart and all of this. But we know autism is so subjective. And diagnosticians and professionals' interpretation of autism is really, really subjective as well. And quite often we know that professionals, when they get trained, confirmation bias kicks in, and the first bit of training that they receive is always the default. No matter what new information you bring in, unless you really smack it home, they always default back to the first thing they learn, which is why you have professionals now who were trained in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, and we're still living with this legacy of theory of mind and mind blindness and extreme male brain and executive dysfunction and weak central coherence and all of this rubbish that has been debunked. But we still have professionals who firmly believing this because that's what they were taught initially.
Absolutely.
It's crap. It's ridiculous, and it causes harm for us.
It does, absolutely. And I always think to like what you were saying, Kieran, I've never got a distinction for any written work ever. Any practical work, any artistic work, I've always done really well at, because that's my thing. But any written work, I've always got really low marks and not done very well, mostly because I've not really understood what they're asking me. Or I've been trying to explain it, but my brain, and then the link between the stuff that comes out of my mouth, it's not necessarily the same.
Yeah.
My brain's going, you're lying, that's not what I said. So I'm just like, all right, okay. But because of the way the course was set up, because of the support that was put in place, meant that all my needs were met and I was able to show my full potential. And that was just completely, I guess, liberating, and it boosted my confidence, and it made me realize that all of the wrong labels that I was given can all go now, because it's clear that I'm not stupid, and it's clear that I'm not going to never achieve like I'd always been told. It's that I'd never been put in an environment that met need, like a plant that's put in a dark room with no water.
So
oh dear, it's dead.
For people that don't know, Rachel, I'm going to ask you a very leading and rhetorical question. Why was your course set up like that?
What do you mean? Tell me more.
Why was your course set up to meet your needs? What was the reason that your course was set up to meet your needs?
Because the course was set up, I guess, by autistic people, for autistic people, and by somebody who has a good command of the subject, who's been in the business a long time, and who just has, do you know this is another analogy, okay? Do you know the Google Maps car that has the camera that's all the way around?
Yeah.
I always imagine that he has that sort of perspective, because he never, it's like he's always, like 360 degree perspective, trying to consider everything.
Yeah.
And I always think, because now I realize that that's possible, and that my old ways of thinking can go, because they're no longer helpful. Then it just goes to show, doesn't it, that autism does not have to be diagnosed. It doesn't have to be seen as a deficit. If we actually saw it for what it really was, then we could actually see that if we reset the balance of neurodiverse and neurotypical, or PNT, that the world would function far better than it does now, for so many reasons. And that if you don't need to be diagnosed as a PNT, why do you need to be diagnosed as autistic? Well, you don't. But then it makes me sort of consider, then, is the negativity kept? Because do they make money from it? I know this probably sounds really,
and
because, but I'm a bit suspicious, because they say, oh dear, autism, oh, we've got this to offer you, it's £1 million, Do you get me? So
I think some of it as well, because when we look at accommodations, whether that's in a learning environment for adults or for children, whether we look at employment accommodations, any kind of area, actually the accommodations that neurodivergent, that autistic people ask for, don't tend to be to the detriment of neurotype of neurotypical people. Actually, it tends to be for everybody's advantage, but it's longer and it might be more expensive, and you have to think about it more, and there has to be a little bit more consideration and a lot more flexibility.
But isn't that a short-term thing? Like spending on it short-term and then long-term. So it's almost like you can either keep providing water to people and charging them, it costs a lot of money, or you go there and you build a well. Do you get what I mean? That's what I think needs to be done. A whole chunk of money, making the world low arousal, and the approach to education and everything all low arousal. And I think so many people, I think the whole of humanity could benefit.
Yes, we would.
And yet the other way round, the majority benefit, but a huge amount of people in the minority suffer to the point of, life ending, It's just like, what?
What you're describing there, the reason for all of that and what you're describing there, Rachel, was capitalism.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you see, the capitalism, the few outweigh the needs of the many.
Yes, but I think, sorry to come back about this, but capitalism, I don't think there's a problem with a capitalism. It's the person behind the capitalism. It's a bit like the analogy with the gun. The gun isn't dangerous. It's the person who's holding the gun. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
So like capitalism could be used for good, but instead it's used for bad because people are so obsessed with money, and it's just like, oh my gosh.
Which is capitalism.
Which is, yeah, I see, because
capitalism was set up by those people to control it, and that's the problem.
Yes. Do I sound really stupid? I'm sorry.
No, not at all. No.
I just feel like, to me, it just makes it's all really clear. And yet when I try to explain to people that you can actually make money. I mean, what is it like Monsters Inc., where they make the energy from scaring children and they realize actually by making them laugh, they get more energy. Why can't it be seen like that? You know, that actually by making the world better for everybody, you get more money back than having it the way that it is now. That's what I mean. Have I explained that better? I'm sorry if I've not explained.
No, that might,
I feel a bit embarrassed if I've gone a bit red.
No, not at all. We do need to be coming to the end. I will quickly, somebody in the comments has asked us about including ADHD a bit more. We are specifically Autistic Parents UK. Quite a lot of us are co-occurring ADHD, so it does come up, but that's kind of our main focus is the autistic side. But actually any of our Q&As, we always end up mentioning it, don't we? I know I'm an inattentive ADHD. Rachel, you've spoken about your ADHD before, haven't you? So
apparently it's both types at the top 99 percentile. I was like, good grief. I said to the doctor, I laughed about it. So that's the best mark I've ever got, and he didn't laugh.
Oh, the queen of ADHD.
Yeah. I thought he was going to drag me off and have me shot, because he asked me, have you had children? I'm like, yes, I've already created another autistic person.
It's too late.
And then do like a little finger going, oh, like this. Yeah.
Yes, I feel a bit like that sometimes. Look at my spawn. My children watch this in years to come. I love you all dearly, but we're definitely aiming out there to change the world. But I think at this point we're going to need to finish up. I know Kieran needs to head off, and we've covered certainly most of our pre-questions and a lot of our live questions as well. So thank you so much again, Kieran, for joining us. It's an absolute delight as ever to have you along. Thank you. We haven't got another date booked, but we'll have some emails.
I'm sure we will.
I can rope him back in, and we'll
I enjoy these too much.
But thank you very much. Take care, and actually we'll say goodbye to the wider Facebook world. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. You're welcome to still pop questions on there. I'll be on for the next certainly for the next half an hour or so, coming on and answering questions, and I can always come back and answer questions. So absolute delight to have you all with us. Rachel, thank you so much for coming along.
You're welcome. Thank you, Ruth.
Gorgeous to see you all.
Thank you, Kieran.
We'll be back. Our next one is with Luke, in fact, who Rachel was just talking about there. We've got a webinar with Luke on, I believe, the 18th of July. Aisha will be right into comments if I've just said the wrong date, but I believe it's the 18th of July. And we'll be back for that, and then we'll rope Kieran in shortly afterwards.
Very good.
So, thank you very much.
Have a good weekend.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.